about the speaker, Dr. Mitchell has over 27 years of teaching experience and has won awards such as Education First Teaching Excellence Award 2020 in Saudi Arabia, the Sustainability Champion Award in 2023, and she's also achieved Carbon Literacy certification. She is a Higher Education Academy Principal Fellow and has served as a TESOL, CAEP, and an NC AAA accreditation reviewer. At Prince Sultan University, she's the Vice Dean of the Deanship of Quality Assurance in Development and Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. She's on the board of many chairs, and she's also a member of the Literature Publishing and Translation Commission's Board of Directors. A few housekeeping reminders. Kindly keep your microphones muted throughout the presentation to avoid background noise. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A at the end of the session. Feel free to post your questions in the chat box at any time. I'll read them out for you at the end. Dr. Mitchell, it's over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I'm going to be talking about empowering educators, action research for impact. And sometimes when I talk about action research with my colleagues, not everyone understands what is action research and how beneficial it is. And actually, as educators, as teachers, we are doing action research on a regular basis, maybe at not so much at a formal level, but at an informal level. Anytime that we're trying out a new teaching strategy or a new activity with our students, you're kind of doing action research. You're seeing how well it works with the students. If it doesn't work so well, then you modify, you adapt at a basic level. But if we go a little bit further, okay. Okay. If we go a little bit further and we dig a little bit deeper into what is action research, this is just what I'm supposed to be talking to you about today, but let's go on. It's kind of like a reflective, systematic approach. And what do I mean by that? It involves like a structured process where you get the opportunity to reflect and systematically improve your teaching practices and help your students grow as learners. It's very much practitioner-driven research because unlike traditional research, action research is driven by us as educators, addressing specific challenges within our own context. And it's kind of like a cycle of improvement. As Maria can tell you, I'm very much into continuous improvement across the board, no matter what you are doing. So for me, I think it's a great opportunity to do that. You plan, you act, you observe, and then you reflect, and then you are able to implement effective changes on what's happening inside your classrooms. And then obviously, at the end of the day, we hope that it supports educational growth. Whether you're teaching in K through 12 or higher education, you can still be employing the action research process to improve what's happening inside your classrooms. So then what is it? I have some references here. I'm sure Maria will share the slide decks with you that gives you like an idea of what action research is. But let's go to, if we want to define it, it's like curriculum research and development ought to belong to the teacher. I'm a true believer of this. I mean, we're the ones inside the classroom. We're the ones who are connecting with our students. We can see where they're at. We have the content in control. So we need to know, like, is this effective or is it not effective? If it's not effective, what can I do to make it better? It's not enough that we work or, we really have to reflect on and think about what should be studied, what couldn't be studied. And it's a chance for you to basically just do research on yourself. If you want to work with others, I suppose you can collaborate and do action research across different classes, I suppose, but then there has to be some kind of control factors in there. But it's really, for me personally, a great way for me to reflect on what I do. So it's practical and rigorous approach to professional inquiry. It can relate to education and is therefore of particular relevance to lecturers engaged in their daily contact with students. I also think that it can be used to investigate issues in education management or administration in a department, faculty, college, university, school, no matter what level of school you might be teaching in. So it's important that we really reflect on what is it we want to encounter. Further to this, what is action research? It concerns social actors. So you have to think about this. Those people carrying out the professional practice from day to day, which is basically you, your students, maybe some of your colleagues. Its purpose is to understand and to improve those actions. So it's about trying to understand professional action from the inside. And then the methodology of action research involves making a change, adaptation, or innovation. That is, in essence, taking action. Okay. Here's a model. It was hard to get it on the slide, but you can see this is just one example of an action research model where it's the collaborative leadership for evidence-based continuous school improvement. So it's the identify, design, implement, analyze, reflect, revise, repeat. That's like the whole cycle, if you will. I think I left out collect, but collect is down here. Okay. And when we look at this, an action research is right here in the heart of the circle. And the biggest emphasis right here is collaborative process, going through, reflecting on, implementing, acting, analyzing, collecting, doing all of these things helps us to grow as educators. Now the question is, all right, so this is what action research is in a nutshell, but why use action research? For me personally, I think it's as a teacher, you want to change and improve your practice. As I'm always telling everyone, never stop learning. So it's a way for you to grow as a practitioner. You may be concerned that things might not be going as you wish, or you may need to implement a new initiative, but are unsure how to do it effectively. So you can try out different ways, and this can be done using the active research process. You're continually seeking ways of improving practice, ways that offer practical solutions to problems specific to your practice. You know that someone else's solution may have merit, but that it's never quite right for the individual situation within which you work. You know that practice is always influenced by context, okay? So for me, I was putting in here some of the things that I value and what I think about and how it impacts what I do inside my own classroom. Simple terms is basically planning, action, monitoring, and reflection. As long as you're doing this, it can lead to publication, doesn't have to lead to a publication. But if you're in higher education, we're constantly being pushed to produce research articles and publish. So it's a great opportunity to publish. Another way of looking at it, problem identification. So now I was talking about this. So now you have to identify a problem, and I'm going to ask you to identify a problem in a little bit. So that's where the cycle starts. You first have to pinpoint what is the specific problem you want to investigate, or a concern, might be a concern, within the educational setting that needs to be addressed. It all depends on your context. Then the planning and implementation phases come in, and this is where you plan and carry out your interventions designed to solve the identified issues, whether it was a specific problem or a concern within your own educational setting. And then you collect your data, whether it's through observations, surveys, feedback, however, whichever research method you utilize. And then, of course, you analyze it. And then you have time for reflection upon that analysis and what the results are saying. And then based on that and your reflection, you have a chance for adjusting what actually happens inside the classroom or a specific setting, depending on what you're going about and researching. Is it really so simple? I'm trying to make it sound simple. Not always. It all depends on what you're researching. All representations of the action research process on paper are simplistic. In reality, though, life is complex and things rarely go as planned. So it may start with a carefully planned action. The nature of the process makes the outcomes uncertain. And this is what I'm saying is you kind of have to be agile and flexible with what's going on, especially when you're doing action research, because you're trying to test out this new methodology, for example, inside the classroom. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it's not working, then you have to come up with another solution. So this is what I mean by that complex. And then, the planning, you think it's going to go this way, then it might go in another direction. Links emerge with aspects that were not anticipated. So this is true. You might be thinking that, for example, using Kahoot or using AI inside the classroom, it's going to have this kind of impact on the students or on the learning process. But then you get in and you start doing this and you find that, hey, maybe it does help. It does work. Or it's not working. Why isn't it working? And then you have to investigate further to see what are the aspects, what's keeping it from helping the students if it's being used inside the classroom. Tools, these are just some samples. You can put in the chat box if other tools that you might use: peer observation, a reflective diary or log, student feedback on the action recording, whether audio or video, depending on your context, student outcomes. There are so many things that can be involved in this. Maybe the questions on an assessment, like the types of assessment that you use, or an ample opportunity or ways of collecting data and the different tools that might be used based on your actual project, whatever you decide to use. An example from my own experience, I've done something called several things. I do something called reflective response. Okay. And what this is I give the students a chance to either watch a video or to read a research paper, and then they have to respond to it. And what this does is it forces them to actually read and then evaluate and critically think about and connect what we've been talking about in class. And for me, it's a great tool for my students and the courses that I teach, but it varies. Okay. The question, I'm giving you the pros, but I also have to talk about some of the negative thoughts out there about action research. Some say, does action research qualify as real research? They might say something like, it's not based on interrogation of empirical data, micro project size compared to other research, may not produce findings, strength of theoretical underpinning contested, However, I would like to argue that it does have rigor and validity. It does have contextual relevance, and it does have theoretical contribution. Just a quick question. Have any of you used action research? You can just type in the chat box, yes, no. Have you used action research as a process in the previously? Yes, no, yes, no, no, yes, yes, yes. Okay, those of you who have used it, how have you used it? Okay, those of you who are saying yes, how have you used it? For students and coworkers, I used an AR model. Okay, and up, let me see. Collected data looking at how, hang on one second, how students interacted with the teacher and each other. Yes. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, and what do I mean by rigor and validity? I think, we have to think action research employs systematic cycles of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. So you have that triangulation, and ethical practices and documentation are applied. So it achieves that methodological rigor comparable to other qualitative approaches. And when we think about the contextual relevance, I really believe that it's highly valued for its practitioner-led focus, addressing real-world problems in authentic settings. I mean, at the end of the day, this is what we're doing. We're getting in there. We're getting at the nitty-gritty. We're looking at the practical application of different things, and we're seeing, does it work? Does it not work? If it doesn't work, then what are our recommendations for improving it? For me, it's a win-win any way you look at it. And then the theoretical contribution, although it's often small scale when we look at action research projects, it can contribute to theory by generating grounded insights and reflective practices, which can align with critical and participatory paradigms in research. I think it's important that we think about that and we understand that. Next slide. Does it matter if action research is not real research? For me, I think you understand where I stand. I truly believe that it is a great way of conducting research and improving our educational practice. And it underpins evidence-informed approaches, and it engages you in critically reflective evaluation of your practice. So that's a win-win. Now, what I'd like you to do is brainstorm ideas for a project, something to think about. I mean, we're talking about action research, and just something small scale and clearly focused. You can ask, what do you aim to improve? What are you going to do? What action will you take? How will you monitor? What triangulation? Just think about your current context. Have you had difficulty with a certain teaching strategy or applying a certain method? What kind of strategy can you use to help you improve that so that the students can benefit from the learning? Okay, any ideas? All right. Okay, Sophia said, I used AR in my class by identifying a challenge, trying out a new teaching strategy, observing how students responded, and then reflecting and adjusting my approach to improving the learning process. Shazia said, in writing class. Okay. Technology use. How does using an app or an online tool affect student learning? Absolutely. Visual literacy? Absolutely. Yeah, there are tons of tools now. Students have glossophobia. What kind of classroom activities improve engagement and attainment by male students? Okay, excellent. For new ways of assessment? Absolutely. And you start from there. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Shafkat. During my MPhil research on DMT. Okay. I'm using logical thinking, using diagrams, using ZBook tools, help me during it and explain my idea. Thank you, Dr. Allah. All right. So now I've got all of you thinking because, I know I have 30 minutes. I keep looking at my watch to make certain I don't go over. So I want you to keep these ideas, these initial ideas that you have right now. We'll come back to it because I'm going to give you a task for you to do after. Okay, I want to spend a little bit of time when we think about what's happening in education right now. There's a major trend towards how we use digital tools, how we use AI. So, and exploring how artificial intelligence is transforming education or educator-led inquiry. Okay, let's just think about that for a second and think about what's out there. Okay, AI powered personalized learning and assessment. Okay, we have ChatGPT, we have Copilot, and there are so many. There's Gemini, so many tools that and the way that it keeps like it's going so quickly. So we really have to think, okay, generative AI, it was a hot topic, but now it's becoming less, and it's becoming more towards the, what is it, agent or agentive AI tools as well. So we need to be aware of what AI tools are available or what tools are going to help us in our particular context. And then how are we going to help our students develop those skills for AI? So for me, I see this as a great opportunity for action research. I think Dr. Allah, you were saying you were using different tools. This is a great way to do action research on those specific tools. How are your students using it? Is it helping them develop critical thinking, the skills or application of whatever aspects for your particular courses? Is it helping them develop that? How is it being used? You could track the impact of those AI tools with your students. You know what I mean? So it becomes more personalized, and you can see the impact of AI powered tools. Just saying. Creation of adaptive assessments based on student responses. The adaptive learning tools are fantastic. If you've not used them in any of your courses with any of, like, the publishers have example, Connect with McGraw-Hill. They have an excellent adaptive learning tool in their system, and it does help the students. If they answer correctly, it goes to more challenging. If they answer incorrectly, takes them back, they can relearn, and then it changes the types of questions that the student gets until they've mastered the topic. And it supports differentiated learning and real-time intervention. Oops, sorry. If we think about AI as a collaborative research assistant, tools like Consensus, Elicit, Research Rabbit. Recently, I was at a conference. There's several new ones that have come out as well. You can look at how you can apply these tools. Does it really help the students write literature reviews? Does it help you as an educator if you're doing research? Does it help you with your literature review? Not do the work for you, not do the work for you, but help you organize it, put it into themes, find the literature. You know, sometimes it's difficult to find recent cases that are relevant, especially for students. AI helps analyze qualitative and quantitative data efficiently. Should we be using it? Should we not be using it? How? And if we are using it, how are we using it? I mean, there's so many opportunities for action research on these topics. Supports visualization of research connections and trends. So you can be really thinking about what can we be doing with these tools. If we look at, and if we go deep into the classroom, I personally like Copilot. This is why I keep throwing it in the slides. ChatGPT is okay, but I prefer Copilot over ChatGPT, just a personal preference. It can help you come up with pictures. It can help you add images, give you feedback on if this is really doing what it needs to be doing. You can use AI-powered chatbots to support student learning. Action research becomes more data-driven and scalable. So you can be thinking about like, okay, what action research topic can I put if I'm looking at AI? Okay, just really quick, some reflective questions. How can AI tools enhance the data collection and analysis phases of action research? What ethical considerations should educators keep in mind when using AI in classroom-based research? And in what ways can AI support collaboration among educators conducting action research? Just some reflective questions for you to be thinking about. Lastly here, impact. What is the impact of action research in classroom practice? You think about student engagement, interactive strategies to boost participation, assessment strategies, refining assessments for diverse learners, collaborative learning, peer-led activities to enhance teamwork. These are all ways that we could go about doing and conducting action research. And you can see here, I've given you some examples: improving student engagement through interactive learning strategies, refining assessment methods to better support diverse learners. And it really helps us to hone in and make an impact. As Hogg et al. In 2024 emphasized that with rigorous design, action research generates context-specific insights. And McIntyre et al. Highlight its collaborative nature, enabling co-construction of knowledge with students and peers. And for me, this is extremely important. Post-webinar follow-up activities. I told you I'd give you an activity. So you can do. So choose one AI tool and apply it to a small-scale classroom inquiry. Document your process and findings, and then join an online educator community to share, discuss AI-enhanced action research ideas, and then design a collaborative action research project with a colleague using AI tools for data collection or analysis. Try it. And then maybe through Maria and her website or her groups, we can be sharing what have we found out, so we can learn from one another and possibly even collaborate together on some action research projects. Compare, contrast.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Exactly. Why not?
I'll send them a document after with the certificates, and let's see what data we collect, and probably we can share it with you, Dr. Adeel.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was an excellent overview about action research, and I've done two, and I was all ears what you were saying. So we have 5 minutes before we ask Dr. Waller to start his presentation. If any of the attendees would like to question Dr. Connie Mitchell about any of her views, or you can open your mic and have a question with her, you can write in the chat box. So Miss Manal can read it out for Dr. Connie. You have 5 minutes now before we start Dr. Waller's session. You can type in the chat box. So we have one question from Lubna. Ethically speaking, she says, is it okay to use these tools for editing and improving the content? AI tools, I guess.
She's asking if it's ethically what?
Is it ethically okay to use
Good
AI
question.
tools to improving the content?
Well, it comes back to your context. What is the policy? What are the regulations?
Yeah.
If you're asking me personally, or if you're asking what regulations state, it depends on your context. Like for my university, I was involved with creating the AI policy and a framework for how whether faculty and or students use AI in their work. It's great, but you have to remember that it's an assistant. It's not there to do the work for you. And I tell my students, if they're going to use AI, they have to cite that they used AI, and they have to cite how they used the AI. Was it just for checking the language? Was it to add images to the document, or along those lines? So they have to state how they use the AI. I don't mind them using it because I know they're going to be asked to use it when they get in the workforce. So, but they have to tell me which AI tool they used and how they used it. And the goal is to get them to understand it. I know I'm going to try to keep it short. Here's an example so you can really teach your students about AI. Give them a prompt, engineer a prompt, have them put it into the AI and let it produce it, okay? And then ask them to write from themselves this in response to that same prompt, and then have them compare the answers to see if they can see the difference between human versus AI. And you can tell the difference, by the way.
Okay, so we have another question from Samreen. Why is action research often confused with experimental research?
Good question. Perhaps because of its depending on what aspect of the action research you're doing, it is kind of like doing an experiment, because you're testing out perhaps you're testing out a new way of assessing your students, or perhaps you're testing out. So it's like but you don't have a control group. You're doing it with your own students. So like in an experiment, you would have a control group, and then the other group where you're actually trying to see if their growth is different from the control group, or you've made some kind of modification to it. So they are different, but they have some similar aspects to them. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so we have another question from Joanne. Is there any AI to use in data interpretation for qualitative research?
Is there any what? Pardon?
Is there any AI to use in data interpretation for qualitative research?
There are lots of tools out there that can help you do that, yes. In vivo is great. There's also Gemini. I know some friends who use Gemini, and I'm sure there are a lot more different AI tools out there. And I think Dr. Allah has listed a bunch right here. She put
Yeah.
in vivo as well. Atlas, Quarkos, ChatGPT or GPT-based tools, Monkey Learn. So many of them. There are so many
Yeah.
out there.
So we have one more question from Abid. Do you think that action research is applicable in research topics that are related to learning instead of teaching in a classroom?
Yes, of course. You can do it in respect of learning. It doesn't have to be just by teaching pedagogies. It could also be from the aspect of learning as well.
Great. So does anyone else have any questions? You can put them in the chat box, or you can turn on your mic and let Dr. Connie know. There's another question from Sala. Can uses of AI tools be appropriate or sound confusing in research references?
Good question. And I think it varies from one journal to the other. There are regulations about how you use AI. In my experience, even like when I'm submitting proposals to conferences, so on and so forth, they ask you, was AI used? You can say yes or no. If you say yes, you have to state, as I said, you have to state which tool did you use and how did you use it. So
Okay.
for me, I think this is the thing. It's you can't stop people from using AI, but you want them to use it ethically and appropriately.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Connie. It's been lovely having you with us for this session.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Connie. It was a pleasure, as ever. We are honored to have you and join us today. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Dr. Waller,
Right. Okay. I'll
would you
just send her.
yeah.
Just requested to be able to share the screen.
Yes, please.
That's great.
Welcome. So, once you're ready, Manal will introduce you and we will start from there. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll share that and then get it into the slideshow mode. There we go. I hope everybody can see that.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Manal,
Okay,
over
are
to
we
you.
ready?
Yes.
Okay. So our second speaker for today is Dr. Daniel Waller, who has been working in education for over 30 years, much of it in higher education and teaching academic English. He has been supervising PhDs for over 10 years and has a strong interest in how people develop their writing skills in different settings. Dr. Waller, it's over to you.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and talk today. It's very valuable, and actually it's really nice to be following on from Connie, because talking about action research, I think this starts to fall into that kind of area. So what I'm talking about today is this question around the jump from writing for a thesis. And it's really based on observation and reflection as a student myself, although getting on a bit now, as a supervisor, and as an examiner of PhDs, and a sort of growing interest in this question around what is it that you have to do at the kind of a writing level, what changes as a writer to be able to write at that level. And again, it comes out of observations of my own experience of doing a PhD, but also of supervising students doing it, and seeing students sort of struggling with the jump from MAs and postgraduate level up to the kind of thesis level, and reflecting on that. And the aim of what I'm doing at the moment is I'm working towards setting up a research project. So this has been a really valuable opportunity to kind of put my thoughts together and to sort of explore it a little bit. So anyway, I'll get us started. So first of all, why am I interested in this question around how people learn to write a PhD? Well, I supervise students quite a lot. My background is around looking at writing. My PhD is in looking at differences of writers at B2 and C1. I'm very interested in writing generally, particularly from a fairly formative experience. If you could imagine me as a school child at the age of about 14, having faced with writing my first essay. I wrote an essay. I handed it in to my teacher. I was very, very pleased with my essay. And it came back with a red line through it and the words, "This is not an essay," written at the bottom, which at the time I remember burning with indignation about this. And still today, I sort of think about, well, how was I supposed to know what to write if I didn't know what an essay was? And again, I think that has connections to what I'm talking about today. I supervise students who are from the UK. I also supervise a lot of international students. The issues I'm talking about today are not unique to students who do not have English as a first language. They affect UK students as well. At the moment, I'm supervising several people. And again, noticed this issue coming up with a couple of people. I had one student fairly recently who is an incredibly gifted student, sort of sent in a draft of the literature review, of their first iteration of literature review. And it was sort of descriptive and informative. It was sort of everything they knew about the subject, but it wasn't a PhD level. It wasn't the kind of writing that's needed at that particular level. I had another student who submitted quite a lot of work, but was very descriptive. There wasn't a line of argumentation running through it. And again, it made me kind of wonder and think about this. What is the jump? What is the thing that has to happen? How does it happen? And how do we guide learners to do this? Reflecting on my own practice, thinking about my own PhD, I know that I wrote about 15,000 words before I wrote anything that went into the actual thesis itself. There was a very long period of writing and of knowing that it wasn't quite good enough to submit. Again, another interesting reflection is that before I submitted the PhD, about a week before, I reread one of the chapters and then rewrote it. And the feedback that came through was that this, from the examiners, this was the clearest chapter. It was the best written chapter. It had been one of the earliest chapters, but something had happened in the interim that improved it. So I'm going to move on to talk about what is a PhD, what are some of the expectations of a level. I'll be asking you a little bit about what you know about that. We'll look at some of the cognitive models and say, well, do these provide us some of the answers? And then move on to where I am at the moment, which is looking at some research questions and some methods by which I'm proposing to investigate these questions in more detail and exploring, what is the jump, what is the gap? So in terms of PhD, just to be clear what we're talking about, most people, when you think of PhD, they think about these huge pieces of work, which are very common in humanities, in art and design, education, and you'll see over on the right there, about 80,000 words at PhD level, compared to sort of the MAs, which are around 25,000 words. If you are operating over medicine, science, and engineering, a PhD will be about 40,000 words. Again, considerable amount of difference, but you are expected to carry out other things alongside the PhD. If you're submitting a PhD, particularly sort of around art, you might be actually producing a piece of art and then writing a thesis of around 50,000 words to explain, explore, and discuss what you have done. So they come in different shapes and sizes, and the actual route by which people can do PhDs have changed enormously, even in the last kind of 10, 15 years. So, for example, some of the people I supervise are doing EdDs, so they're doing PhDs in education, which actually are similar to what's called the professional doctorate, whereby they undertake a number of modules first, and then the actual PhD is only about 50,000 words. There's also PhDs by published work. So this is very common in areas like journalism, where someone submits a body of work, of articles, and then the PhD element of it kind of links those together into an argument. And then the newest one I come across, and I'm actually supervising somebody on, is the PhD by portfolio. And this is used often in business. And this is where people use projects they've worked on in their working life. So usually two, and then a third project that they are currently doing. And again, it's linked by a narrative, and it is around about 50,000 words again. I'm not someone who's particularly sniffy about whether it's 80,000 or 40,000. I think the number of words is actually probably harder to write a thesis at around 40 or 50,000 words than a PhD. I have never come across a PhD student who felt that 80,000 was too few words. It was too many words. The biggest problem PhD students often have is cutting down the thesis in the end. But largely today, I'm talking about the kind of traditional model of around 80,000 words, but also perhaps the ED and things like that. And I think the issues are very, very similar in both of these. Anyway, so moving on. So I just want you to take a few moments. You can use the chat if you prefer, but just a question for you to have a think about. What is the difference, do you think, between writing at an undergraduate level and writing at a postgraduate master's level? If you were advising a student and saying to them, this is what's different, if you're working at master's level, what would you tell them? What would change about writing? Just have a moment or two to think about that. If you want to put things in the chat, or if you want to use the QR code, that's fine. Okay. Just realised I can't see the chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm just standing
next to the
I've got it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, looking at existing ideas. Okay, goes deeper, critical analysis, insight. Yeah, evaluating sources. Yeah, I'd agree with all of those. Yeah.
Guys, you can scan the QR code and also response there online.
Yeah, I've got that. I can see the chat now, so it's fine. Yeah, MSU critical, so critical thinking. Yeah, so you need to display that. However, you do that. Yep. Yeah. Again, I think that notion of critical thinking is really, is really useful. Choice of words, yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good one about focusing on the readers, and I think that does make that's a particular thing there. Yeah, masters get more mature, you get more focused. Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things to sort of think about at the kind of the master's level. So then let's have a think about if you're taking it up to the next level. If you take it up to PhD, what is the difference if you are writing, if you're taking that jump from the master's level to the doctorate level? Again, if you've not done a PhD and you're not in that area, again, maybe have a think about what you think it might be. Yep. And then, yeah, PhD is about creating new knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. That's always going to criteria. Definitely. Impact. Yep. That impact question, that's one of the ones you tend to ask PhD students, is the so what question. So you've done this, so what? What have you found out? What does it mean? Who does it affect? Yep. Reflective and evaluation. Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts about what marks out PhD? Yeah, voice, value of the topic. Yeah. That deep critical understanding of things. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Definitely there. Mastery of literature. Yeah. Mindsets. Yeah. You're all getting there. You're all talking about the things that I'd expect to hear and see for that. And it is a jump. Independent researchability, problem solving on your own. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the PhD is the driving test for researchers. It demonstrates that you have the tools and the abilities as a researcher to be able to kind of take stuff forward and do research on your own. So yeah, all of those I think are very valid ways of kind of looking at it. So in terms of what I've kind of got here next. Yeah, I mean, it's those things around the original research. It's got to be original at that level. And again, that's difficult because original research sometimes means explaining things that there might not be concepts for, or there might be, you're having to adjust the concepts into something new. So it's very much of that kind of creation end of things. You've got things like the contribution to knowledge. So again, you've got to make a significant contribution. So again, it's not just about what it being new for you or you learning stuff. You've got to be putting something into the community that the community did not have before. So it's that being able to explain that significance is very important. The scholarly context that somebody mentioned in the chat there about this idea of, you have to have a command of the existing theories and be able to sort of articulate those. But more importantly on that is that idea of positionality, of being able to position yourself in the argument. And again, this is something that with one of a supervisee, I remember looking at what they'd done, and they told me a lot about the area and a lot about the subject and a lot about the writers, but I didn't know where they located themselves or why, who they'd sort of aligned with, and that was kind of missing at that stage. The systematic methodology, so again, being able to sort of carefully and explain where you are and all that, and the argument and evidence, being able to cite it, and really essential at this level. I put Bloom's taxonomy up there because it's so often used in education, but one of the things I kind of worried about with it is I found it kind of broke down a bit when you talk about the PhD. Really, when you get to kind of the top end of undergraduate and to postgraduate, Bloom's taxonomy sort of stops being helpful. It's not quite as easy to construct what you're after at that stage. So this is where I thought I'd turn to look at some of the kind of theories of writing and what they tell us about these things, because that might be start to tell me why learners and myself struggle a bit with writing at this particular level. So I'll start off with one I used many years ago. I used this as part of the PhD. It is from the social cognitive framework around writing, and this is Field's phases of writing. And the key thing about the model, and there are lots of models of writing, but one of the things that is sort of articulated in the social cognitive framework and in various of these frameworks is a theory of writing needs to be able to explain not only beginners and people who are learning to write, but it also needs to be able to explain proficient writing as well. And Field's phases are quite useful for starting to sort of to get to grips with this. So the stages are down the left there. Well, it should be phases rather than stages. So there's macro planning, which is the kind of the big level, pulling things together, looking at resources, working out about genre, audience, organization, again, the sequencing of what you're doing, depending on the genre and the type of stuff. Micro planning is when you are right on the cusp of writing. It's the text you're writing at the moment, and all the sort of stuff that's kind of feeding into that as you are doing that writing. Translation is taking that voice in your head and turning it into script on the page. Monitoring, I think we're all familiar with that, the idea of kind of looking at it for accuracy, but also that particular sort of higher levels of proficiency, thinking about purpose and audience, and then revising, again, going back and making changes accordingly. And the key thing about Field's phases is he says these are not one after the other. These are not sequential. They are iterative. They come round and round and round, but they don't happen necessarily in any particular order. Studies of writing, looking at people who are proficient writers, find that proficient writers often start with translation. You start writing in order to write, particularly if you're writing something you're familiar with and you know the genre. So, for example, if you think about how you write an email, if you're writing you get an email in from a friend, a colleague, it's fairly straightforward. You will probably start writing the email before you start actually sort of engaging with any of the processes. because it's second nature. You know what the text is. It's a straightforward response. You've got the macro plan, you know the genre, you know the audience, you've got an idea of kind of the sequence needs to be in. If there's something happens and you suddenly realize that something is slightly more complex, you will perhaps then stop, go back into macro plan and organizing before you then kind of revise and switch back into it. But if, for example, you were writing a text that you were unfamiliar with, and this is where I get to the PhD and that jump, suddenly you're writing in a way that you don't know the genre and you don't know how it kind of fits together. Organization becomes more of a challenge. You're suddenly sort of moving out of that comfortable zone into writing in an area where you need almost to kind of go back. And Swales talks about this idea of almost an apprenticeship in genres, that when we are writing in genres we don't know, there is almost a kind of an apprenticeship period where we learn the conventions of the community, we learn what's kind of required at that stage. And I think to some extent that, to me, starts to sort of highlight some of the things that PhD students go through when they start to write at this particular level. There's a really good example from Swales about, him writing for a journal that he hadn't written for before, and he didn't really know the conventions. Now, Swales, excellent writer. Did he have the knowledge? Yes. Did he have the kind of academic chops? Absolutely. But the article was rejected because he didn't know how to write for the journal. And again, I think that's quite similar to that notion. Yeah, I don't doubt my students' abilities as academics or their ability to produce a PhD, but they don't know the genre at that stage. And at some stage, they need to sort of get to grips with it. So there's ways of exploring this. So the fields phases is a kind of useful way for starting to think down and break down what learners go through at these particular stages. But I'm going to skip on to look at two other models, which I think are quite useful in the context. The first, this is Burita and Scardamalia's, and there are two models they come up with. And the first one is pitched around learners who are not proficient writers. So whether they are young or whether they're writing in a foreign language or just not experienced in writing. And it's the knowledge telling model. And this is where writers effectively, they don't really plan very much. They tend to just sort of write stuff, and it's kind of one thing after another. So for example, if you ask a learner at kind of the lower levels of B1 or weak B2 levels, if you ask them to write an essay about the advantages and disadvantages of living in a city, they'll start off with the advantages and they'll write advantage 1, advantage 2, advantage 3. They'll run out of advantages. They'll switch to disadvantages, disadvantage 1, disadvantage 2. So it's very hand to mouth. It's very driven by what the content is, and they're focused on that. They're not looking at a plan. They're not necessarily thinking about the wider scope. It's on the resources to produce the text. And the model that they put forward for this sort of represents this idea of content knowledge and discourse knowledge are kind of coming into it. But really, it's about generating the language. And there isn't the cognitive space to be able to do anything else because they're so tied up with generating the content and the language. The considerations about audience and structure really don't get much of a look in. So that's a model for kind of for quite sort of low-level writing, really up to about kind of mid B2 type learners. But we're talking about PhD students, and really we're in that area of talking about the knowledge transforming model, that there is a task demand, they focus on audience, which is what somebody said earlier on, and the purpose of the text. They know what the text is for, and they're able to kind of think about that as they're going through. And this is the kind of the model there. Now, the knowledge telling process is still there. It's down there at the bottom of the table. So they have still got knowledge telling that, but they've got the idea of the representation of the assignment, the problem analysis and goal setting. So these writers much better at looking at a sort of analyzing a piece of writing as a problem. And this is key at sort of PhD level, the ability to conceptualize what you're doing as a problem. You've got the content and you've got the discourse knowledge. And this is where I think some of the problems come in for learners at this kind of level. First of all, they don't have all the content. When they're starting off in a PhD, they will know something of the area, they're interested in it, so they will have some content, but they are still getting to grips with the content. They're getting to grips with which writers position themselves in different places, and that positionality is still kind of working through. The other thing they don't have is over on the right-hand side, which is the discourse knowledge. So again, they're not familiar with the discourse of the PhD. They might never have written a text that is that length before. So there's all sorts of things that they need to do within that text, both to manage the text, but also to manage the expectations of the audience and the people reading it. And you can start to see why people perhaps at this stage of writing early on in the PhD go into knowledge telling. Why so often you get a piece of work that tells you everything that they know about a particular topic, but it hasn't been moved into the argumentation. There isn't the kind of the line that runs through it of positionality and sort of critical analysis of it. And the discourse isn't there yet either, because they are grappling with both of those elements. So as a supervisor, as somebody who is working with these students, a key question is, well, how do we help these learners to build up the content knowledge and to start to think about the sequence of arguments and how they're going to do it and how they do the positionality? And how do we help them manage the discourse? How do we help them get in and do that? And to go back to my right at the start, where I talked about my 14-year-old self being told, this is not an essay. Not that this has marked me for the whole of my life, and I've struggled with it ever since. But there was an interesting thing a couple of years later where one of the history tutors, gave us 6 sample essays. And I remember very clearly looking at the essays and going, oh, that's what it is. And, you know, being able to look at them and see that as well. And then sort of thinking about experiences with the PhD, I remember struggling very much with the methodology section, particularly with the sort of the positionality at the beginning, where you have to talk about research traditions and quantitative and qualitative and positivism and, you know, and all these different constructivism. And I remember writing about 6 or 7 pages and then thinking, I've got lost in this. I really don't quite know where I am. And I went to look at other theses by other writers. And I found that a couple of them dispensed with it in about 2 paragraphs. And I was like, okay, I can see what to do. And looking at those examples. So often we say to, I mean, again, as a supervisor, I often say to learners, go and look at other theses, and, you know, that will help you. But actually, that thing about looking at another thesis with a problem-solving hat on, to say to them, read the whole thesis, go and look at this bit, go and look at this and how they manage this, is a much more useful exercise, again, as a reflection and thinking about how I need to work with in the future. So that brings me to the last of my slides, and really talking about where this goes from here. As I mentioned, this is research that I am sort of embarking on. I'm going to go through that process of reflection and thinking about constructing sort of the questions and what I want to explore. The aim being to think about and reflect on practice and to think about, well, what advice and activities should we be doing as supervisors with learners? So I'm very interested in that, first of all, in sort of identifying some of those features. And I've gone for a kind of qualitative phase first. So talking to supervisors about what we asked you today. What are the differences in writing at doctoral level compared to lower levels? And then, well, what do supervisors identify in writing that makes those things? So it's all very well to say it's this, but then, well, what do you mean by that? Can you point to it? What does that mean? What does it look like in a thesis? What are the exponents of that? And then looking at the learners themselves at different stages. So learners who are at the beginning of their journey, learners who are kind of on the road to sort of getting it completed, learners who have submitted. What are the differences in the way that they write and the way that they think about writing? We've got that issue about what do learners at different stages identify. So again, what do they point to? What kind of things? I mentioned the methodology and struggling with that. What kind of things do they point to? So that's the kind of qualitative phase, which then I'm thinking will lead into a kind of corpus investigation of looking, having identified features and some processes of saying, well, okay, well, when you look at a corpus of theses, where are those features? What do successful writers do? How do they exemplify these things? What could we put in front of supervisees when they're starting out on their journey? What kind of guidance can we give them, to help them do this? There's lots of stuff out there. There's lots of advice books on how to write a PhD. What I've struggled with very often is I'm struggling sometimes to find the kind of the evidence-led nature and the things that you can kind of point to and say, actually, that's probably what you need to do. And also using the community and the kind of the expectations of the people who at the end of the day assess and mark these things to build that model. So that's pretty much everything I have to say on this today. Thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them, assuming we have time to do so.
Yes, we have another 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Dr. Waller. So we have 5 to 10 minutes before our next presenter starts, and that is Dr. Nazia. Thank you for your patience. You're up next soon. Just another 5-10 minutes. Attendees can write their questions in the chat box, or Ms. Minal or I can read it out, or you can open your mics now and communicate directly. Any questions? Please go ahead now.
Let me just check the chat book.
I think you have made everybody awestricken. They don't want to ask anything. That's what a good teacher does, isn't it?
No, it's not.
All right.
Just a good question. No, I've not got the ethics approval yet. I'm putting in for that. I am at that process of formulating what it is I want to specifically look at, which is again why doing this today has been really helpful, because sometimes it's by articulating these things to colleagues and to other people that it helps to crystallize some of the things you want to do. So I think it is around that idea of I will be going for ethics approval, but I would recommend to any researcher, if you've got colleagues around or forums like this, go out, put it out there and see what people say.
We have another question from Khadija. What would you suggest PhD students to focus on when they are writing research articles related to their PhD?
I think the difference between the research article and the PhD is, obviously length is a key consideration, but it's about focusing it, cutting it down to the core of what it is the research article about. But the best research articles have a very clear focus. They investigate one or two questions, and then you go in and explore it. You don't have the same kind of scope or availability to explore things as much. Handily, one of the things that research articles, and as a researcher, I find quite frustrating, one of the things research articles often jettison is the methodology. They don't tell you very much about what they did, which I always think is a great shame, because sometimes I can look at it and think, I would really like to know what you did as part of that. The other thing I always kind of want to ask researchers is what went wrong in your research, because things go horribly wrong in everybody's research, and it's sort of kept behind a screen. And really, I think our learners and each other, we learn a lot more from our mistakes and from telling people about horrible mistakes we've made in our research. So I think the research article, it's cutting it back down to the essentials. What is this about? Who are you writing for, crucially? What level are those people at? So, if you're writing for a journal that is, quite a high level respected article, you can probably use a lot of the kind of stuff from the PhD to explain. But if you're writing for something that's teacher focused, you've got to put it into terms that they understand.
There's another question. Any good directions from you for PhD students while choosing their title?
I think the first thing is, you've got to be interested in it. You've just got to be. You won't sustain it if you're not interested in it. So I think that's the very first thing. I think the second thing is a title. You can whittle it down. Start off with the title that you want, and then whittle it down to the core. PhD titles often get there's usually a set word limit when you are putting a thesis in, and they'll say, this, and the bottom line is, does what your title says, does it encapsulate what you're doing? It's not uncommon to go to a viva and for the examiners to say, well, actually, I think your title needs to be tweaked a little bit, or that's not quite what came across to us. And it's not a criticism of the thesis, it's the title probably needs this bit of a correction. But yeah, so I think, it's start off with the title that is as descriptive as you can, and then try to kind of pull it down as far as you can. MPhil level, similar thing, it's the same principle. And again, MPhil, it's a lot of words, it's the same process, and it's still struggling to write at that level. I think a lot of the same overlaps.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Dr. Waller, are you okay if we could share your email with the participants?
Yeah,
They're all requesting.
I will just stick that into the chat now. Thank you very much, everyone. Really enjoyed talking to you all.
Thank you. It was an honor to have you, Dr. Waller. All right. Dr. Connie Mitchel had a comment there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. One of the things you end up saying to a lot of PhD students is really? You really want to do all of that? Yeah, I agree completely with it.
Thank you
Keep
so
it
much.
manageable.
Thank you. Is there any other questions before we request Dr. Nazia to join us? All right. I think thank you so much, Dr. Waller. It was a pleasure and honor to have you. And it was very enriching session of yours. And I think each one of us have learned something from there, and some eye openers as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation.
Pleasure. Pleasure's all ours. Thank you. Dr. Nazia, are you ready to start your session?
Yeah. Can I share?
Yes. Could you kindly share your slides so we're good to go, and then Ms. Manal will take over from there. That's perfect. Thank you. Manal, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, so our third speaker today is Dr. Nazia Adeel, who is a seasoned academic, assistant professor, business consultant, and founder of SkillVisor Business Consulting. She has a PhD in accounting and expertise in business research, management consulting, and data analytics. She's also delivered many workshops and keynote sessions globally in Australia, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Pakistan. Dr. Adeel specializes in making complex concepts simple, empowering professionals to make confident, data driven decisions. Dr. Nazia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for such an excellent introduction. I'm Nazia, and usually my career, like I was an accountant and auditor when I started, and then I have shifted to academics. I did my PhD in accounting from Australia. I have taught MBA students entrepreneurship, although my interest research was accounting, but I am very much excited about learning data analytics. And this is what I'm going to talk about today with you. Currently, I'm working on my startup. So if you want to connect with me and if you want to learn more about my startup, which is actually financial intelligence and business startup planning, so you are happy to connect with me, you can always find me on LinkedIn and check out what I'm trying to work there. So the thing that I would love to talk about today is what data analytics is. It's something entirely different from what you have been listening, because we are looking at research theoretical underpinnings for the last 1 hour. But what I'm going to tell you to move on is to understand how the power of data can actually translate that research into something very meaningful or very effective. Data analytics means that you are trying to convert and change your raw data into something that's going to give you a significant actionable insight. Actionable insight, you can make a decision. You can change your sales process. Or if you're doing your research, for most of you, if you're doing your PhD, you should be able to present your findings into something that's very verifiable, that's reliable, and that can have significant impact. So you're reporting the outcome of your thesis. And what if you are working in market analysis, or you're not doing your research, or for example, you're running a company? So even if you're looking at data analytics, it gives you this edge of presenting your research with confidence. So today we're going to look a little bit more about basics of why it's important, and I'm going to share with you a very affordable and you can say interactive tool that can help you learn SPSS. Maybe if you haven't done so, you can share in the chat box if you're working on SPSS or you want to learn SPSS, and also let me know what's your area of specialization so that I can give you examples from that. So why data analytics? So what we look around us today, whatever is happening in terms of generative AI, in terms of organizations moving at the speed of light overnight, and in terms of competitiveness, so organizations defeating each other within months and organizations taking over, every organization which has reported an exceptional performance in terms of decision making, problem solving, business integration, always have some kind of data integration and analytics behind their decisions. So we are looking at a number of benefits here. If you take a look at the screen, I'm talking about accuracy, that your information is correct, whether you're using that, whether you're reporting it to your CEO or CFO or shareholders, or whether you're looking at your customers or consumers. And this is what we see every day on Facebook. So Facebook is getting much better at what kind of ads it should tell you, because Facebook is continuously analyzing your data and predicting your behavior. So this is very, very important. So it's almost happening every year. I've got some statistics from recent research that they talk about that CEOs who have used data analytics have had a significant increase in their profitability. They have had better CRM systems, better human resource management, better inventory management. And when I talk about research, the researchers, I have done PhD myself, and when I look at people presenting their research, the way that they present their data, and I would definitely agree with what Dr. Wallace said, that it's not about the methodology, it's actually what did you find out and how are you presenting it? So this is something that's really important for researchers as well, that how much they're going to emphasize on that. So we look at some of these things: your data, your scientific validity, your efficiency. So data analytics is going to save your time. If you use a software, if you learn how to do this basic analysis yourself, it's a very good skill. You can actually translate it after your PhD or after your master's. You can actually join the industry, and you can also start a business. I'm doing it right now. So there are many ways in which you can upskill yourself. And last but not the least, data analytics actually integrates your business on one platform. So I have a lot of customers, and I'm looking at my sales revenue, and I'm looking at my CRM, I'm looking at my feedback, I'm looking at my inventories. So if I have a very good data analytics software, I can actually look at all of these things together. So making it a little bit more integrated, or maybe a little bit more like valuable for what I want to talk about. So another thing that I want you to consider is that now we cannot avoid it. So it's do or die situation. If we do not learn analytics, we won't be able to work with AI generated interpreted insight, because this is actually what it is being using. So in order to control artificial intelligence, or maybe trying to understand how it is going to evolve, so that we are a little bit one step ahead, as opposing to Netflix, because on Netflix I see that AI is already gaining control of us. So if we don't want to do that, we need to learn data analytics in kind of a promising way. Okay, so today I'm going to share this resource with you, which I have used when I was doing my PhD. And I had no idea about data analytics before I started my PhD. This website, and I've shared it here, it's called Lead Statistics, and you can read it from here. So this is a very good platform. It's not very expensive. When I was a student, I'll show you. So it was just $18 for 1 year, right? So while you're doing a PhD, it's like student-friendly packages, something like that. So it's not something that we can't afford, but let me show you how it does for you. And then I'm gonna go back to our cycle. So what does for me is it gives me a step-by-step instruction of how to conduct each or every possible statistical test for my research in this list. If I do not know which test I need to do, it gives me an option to put my information here, my design, whatever I'm working on, and then it's going to tell me what test I should be doing. So it actually treats you like someone who has just started off with statistics and take you from zero to your maximum point. Okay, so let's take a look at, can you see the screen again? And now I'm going to talk about the steps that we would be taking when we are learning data analytics. So one of the most important step is understanding how we will add data into the SPSS platform. So given the time limit, I cannot show you exactly, or I don't have enough, you can say, time to actually add data, but I can show you some examples that how you can do it in terms of imaging, and also how can you use this particular step-by-step guide to follow that. Okay, now let's go back to our guide. First, let me tell you, SPSS looks like something like this, which I have got on screen. When we open SPSS, this is the first thing that we do. We open a new file. That file has two important data input signs. One is this yellow sign here, which says the data view, and one is this blue, which is the variable view. So when we start our SPSS data addition into the system, the first thing is we write our variables here. And if we have already done them on an Excel sheet, we can simply upload that Excel, and SPSS can actually extract that data from Excel, and it can clearly show me here. So I don't have to do it manually, right? So it's very easy if I've already put it in Excel. But if I have like manual data, I can still use it. And nowadays it's very easy. You can have many ways of putting that data. So what does it mean by data view and variable view? So the first thing with data view, so let's go back to our example here. So in our example, sorry, I just need to increase the size of this. So for example, if I am trying to understand the effect of people on their health, and their age and their gender, that whether they eat rice, how it is related to all these variables. So we got some information here in terms of what is the name of my particular sample, whether they are male or whether they are female, what's their age, and what's the like how many, whether they eat the rice, whether they didn't eat the rice, or they can also use a Likert scale of how much rice they eat, maybe from 1 to 7, or how many times they eat the rice in a week. So there can be many variables. So what we are talking about here is the first thing that I am going to put here is my first variable, probably the name. Okay, and then automatically on the variable view, I will see that that information is going to come here. And then I'm going to put the information about the type of variable, that whether this variable is ordinal, categorical, and I'll show you in the next slide. So here, for example, the type of variable is numeric, okay? Or maybe it's a string variable, or it's like a categorical variable. For example, half of the people that we interviewed or surveyed were males. So we are going to use 1 for male and 2 for female, or maybe 3 for not specified if they have not provided us with their gender information. So that means SPSS will only get information from you in terms of numbers. So if you have any quantitative language words, you need to convert all of that into mathematics. 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 0, 1s. And this is how SPS is going to analyze that data for you. So if you look at the, I'll show you your summary, like the process here. Okay, let's think about doing a simple example. Okay, I want to do a simple linear regression. If your supervisor has already informed you, or you are aware of that test that you need to do that, you can actually open that. Okay, so let's see. Let's open linear regression. So now I'm going to teach you how to do a simple analysis step by step without like making a mistake, because this tool is going to give you ifs and buts, assumptions, decision trees, whether you should make this decision or you should make that decision. The tool is also going to ask you about your variables, about your input, and it is going to give you a solved example right here. So see that? So it has got these 22 pages. Okay, see these 22 pages? Okay, and then in those pages, actually, first, the tool is going to teach me what is the linear regression analysis if I don't have any idea about it. So I'm going to go and open it and see what is linear regression analysis. And then the tool is going to tell me that how I can fit that model into the system, what is my study design, and then it's going to give me an example. Okay, let's go here, because I want to learn, I don't know. So the first thing, I need SPSS on my laptop. So that's another thing that you can find a solution to, and I'll give you a solution right now. So for Saudi Arabia, if you're in Saudi Arabia, and I'm not sure about UK or Australia, definitely not in Australia, but maybe in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and maybe some Middle East countries, IBM provides some pre-training to students or researchers who have .edu.sa email address. And you better check this out, because I was there, and when I was teaching there, I had this opportunity to meet with some of the IBM representatives, and they were very much interested in offering their data analytics training services to students. So you can actually make your account here and then see what kind of free courses can you do from here. So all you need is a student account, and you can send them an email and check that if it's still working. And there are many free courses on this website if you have a student or an educator account. So it's going to help you learn that. Okay, now let's go back to what we were looking at. So for example, if we have the software and we can download it for 1 month free as well, you will download this sample from here. Okay, look at this. And then this lead statistic instructor is going to tell you, after you download this information, right, in terms of, you look at the variable view, it's going to tell you a step-by-step process how to put those values into here. So for example, this is a research question. Here they're talking about some variables. For example, people who watch a lot of TV, for example, number of hours spent watching the TV, and another variable is how much cholesterol they have in their blood. And I'm guessing that it is a very direct relationship. And then the third one is the case number. That method, like is like kind of a extra variable that they're checking, because just in case, so it's a clinical study, so there can be other things that probably we need to check as well. So here we are looking at what's the number of the case. This is our sample, for example, 1 2 3 4 5, and here we're looking at this sample. The name was casino, and they would how much they would watch TV based on their column. So for example, out of 8 of 10. And also if you look at the scale, so here they are going to tell you, if you follow this step by step, you should be able to change this information. So if they have looked at cholesterol level of casino at different times, and they have looked at number of hours casino has watched TV at different times, and they've got a number of observations. So here case number, for example, if it is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, so depending upon whatever you're picking up. So when you start the data view from here, it will automatically start appearing in the variable view. So it's not very difficult. What I want you to see, that if you solve a small example here, it's going to be very useful to use that example to extrapolate your results. So probably not going to look at all of them, but let's see if I am successfully able to put my data here. I'm going to move forward to some places and see that now I have got data for all my cases here, and I also got my other data, whether it's male or female, and number of hours and all that sorted out. Then I can use this button here, analyze, regression, linear, because this was the test that I wanted to do. So it's very easy in terms of if you are very well aware of which test you need. We're also going to do the other scenario in which I'm not sure which test I should be running, and I can ask SPSS, lead statistics tutor, to tell me. I have a research question in my mind, I've got some data, but I'm not sure how to test it. So that means it's also in a learning phase. And then there can be a lot of additional testing. So I'm going to keep on checking the assumptions. Look at this. This is a test for heterosedacity, sometimes sedacity. So it depends upon your research question, your supervisor requirements. And then after you have looked at some results, it's going to give me something to write off. And I'm going to go there after I look at our main presentation again. So for example, okay, so when we look at our data, so let's go back to our original question. We collected some data in terms of the name, in terms of their gender, in terms of their age, and in terms of whether they eat rice or whether they don't like to eat rice. So we're going to check different variables here. So I think male, female, like gender is something important. Maybe it is related to whether they like to eat rice or whether they don't. And also, age. So age is also important, whether they prefer eating rice or not. Okay. So we are going to take a look at, this is how it's going to look like when I will finally add it. And how will I add it? I'm going to go to my leads tutor and then follow the steps for that particular test that I want to run. And those tests are going to tell me how I should be writing it. Okay. So now, remember that there was a question about whether they like to eat rice or whether they don't like to eat rice. Now, the first thing is I want to test whether gender and rice are related or age and rice are related. So actually I have an option. I can select anything from here. When I test this analyze, again, I showed you just how to do it. When you click analyze here, you select the question that's the most important question for you. And you can actually shuffle them, all of them. And I've done in some cases, I've seen some of my colleagues. So if you have a large number of variables, you can actually keep on testing until you find something that you were not expecting in the same sample, right? So it's something that you can learn how to test. You can also select what kind of output you want. If you want to have a bar chart, if you want to have like a simple graph chart, and there is a step in SPSS analysis which specifically talks about your, which I'll show you here, frequency distribution. So we just learned the first 4 steps by looking at how we're going to go through that process there. One thing that I would like to discuss is this data cleansing. So what does SPSS does? SPSS automatically helps you to clean your data. So if you have got some outliers, some responses that were not complete, or maybe some responses which were not enough, so some responses can actually work in terms of how data can be cleansed. I had a question about variables. I just read it. Okay, I'll go to that example and I'm going to answer that question. So the question was about how will we know that which variable is dependent and which variable is independent. So the most basic explanation is the independent variable is the variable that causes the dependent variable to change. The independent variable does not change itself, but it has got something to do with the dependent variable. I'll give you a very simple example. So gender. So let's think about anger or maybe food preferences or travel preferences. I think gender is the independent variable. It might affect the food preferences. It might affect travel preferences. It might affect risk assessment. It does actually. It might affect your ability to make decisions. And it also might affect how you process emotions. So all the things that gender will affect or can affect are my dependent variables. And gender is an independent variable. Sometimes in experiments, what we do, I give the same question. I've done some experimental studies in gender. So what I did, I'm looking at a couple of accountants and auditors in Big Four firms. And what we did, we actually gave them similar questionnaires. But in some of the questionnaires, we changed the CEO to be a male. In some of the questionnaires, we changed the CEO to be a female, right? We also use gender as a variable in their questionnaire survey. And we also checked how the gender of the auditor is going to affect their response. So here, that variable will be the independent variable. So in experimental studies, it's very easy to change or give the setting. However, you need to check the control variables. So if you are sure that there were control variables, you have to establish that system, or you can say you have to establish that situation before you make any of these experimental. That's why experimental designs require a lot of thinking. And this is where I'm going to take you here. So let's go back to your question. Okay, you were asking about dependent variables. I think you might be talking about also association, maybe group differences. So male is group, female group. So probably one group will behave differently and the other group will behave differently. Okay, let's see. Female accountants versus male accountants. Maybe I just want to see how they work. Do they work in the same way? Okay, let's see. Okay, so is the experiment between subject or within subjects? Between subject means that I'm going to have different groups and I'm going to give them the same sample. Within means they're going to be in the same group, but I might give them a different, or it's a mixed design. I might not segregate people. I might not have a control group. So there can be a lot of ways in which you design your experiment. Sometimes it's very difficult to make like different groups. So mixed designs are usually very preferable. Okay, let's see. I want to do a between subject. I will give some only samples to some female accountants in the same organization and some samples to a male accountant. Okay, so let's see how many variables. Okay, let's think about gender. I'm also thinking about their education. I might also think about maybe organization. I'm also think about years of experience. You know, someone might be 10 years working as an accountant, someone might be working as 2 years, so their response will be different, right? I can also think about their qualification. I can also think about their ethnicity. See that? I can also think about their ethics. I can also think about, so all these variables, maybe let's think about two at a time. I've got two independent variables. And since my research is about, okay, let's see that we do not have a covariate because we're going to make it more complex, but okay, let's see. Since my research is about what kind of accountants they are, whether they are making good decisions, bad decisions, whether they are using, you know, that is a separate thing. We haven't talked about it yet. Okay, for example, in my case, I was looking at how do they use accounting standards. So I only have one variable, dependent variable. Yes, I have one, so I'm not gonna have a lot of variables. Okay, let's see. Okay, see that? So I have been informed by this tutor, lead statistics, that you need a two-way ANOVA test. And this is exactly what I did in my PhD. Why? Because the two-way ANOVA test helps me to understand differences between two independent variables and also any interaction between the variables. And this is a very good way. Okay, for example, if I am now sure, even if I were not before, after reading the guide of two-way ANOVA and doing this exercise which I just showed you right now, I should be able to at least predict that I can use two-way ANOVA to test my results. And then I can straight go to here, or remember this part where I was talking about. If I'm already aware of my two-way ANOVA requirement, I can simply go here, but I can recheck, or actually I can verify by using the statistical test selector tool. So it's easier to use that way. Otherwise, it's not, very. If I'm doing it for the first time, if I'm already got some, you can say, information, like I'm sure that which test I want to do, I can do that. Okay. So when I use SPSS, I have this button, analyze, I was talking about. That analyze button is going to take me to different kinds of analysis that I should be doing. And remember, the first thing that you can do, or you would be required to do for your data, will be descriptive statistics. So this is the foundation. You can actually use a lot of data in descriptive statistics, starting from your sample. You can report a lot of these things. It's just tables, mean, median, standard deviation. It's going to also help you to cleanse your data, whether it's a normal distribution, whether it's not a normal distribution, was your sample representative of the population. So there are so many things that you can just address by pressing two buttons: analyze, descriptive statistics. So this is the first thing that we do. However, after you have been able to do that, you can actually go to additional testing and visualization. You can ask SPSS to give you and show you how to create those graphs, or how to create the visual representation of your data. Okay, now let me show you from our guide that if I have selected my two-way ANOVA, okay, and I have conducted my, let's see,
Dr.
example.
Nazia.
Yes.
So we're running out of time, so let's wrap up.
Yeah, this is the last thing I was going to talk
Okay,
about.
great.
So I'm going to show you how to write up the data. So here, when you go here, you will see that lead statistics actually gives you an APA or a journal writing format to write up your results. So you don't have to think. You already have the format. You just need to put the number that you just find out into this format and report your results. Okay. So hopefully by looking at some of these examples, you would be able to, like, at least conduct a basic data analysis. There are some resources on the last slide, the one that I just talked about. Secondly, look at some very good universities library guides. For example, University of Kent in the US, they've got a very easy access guide there. And I also talked about IBM already, and there's a free code camp on YouTube that I found really useful when I was doing my research. So if you want to learn more about it, you can always book a consultation with me. I usually give 30 minutes, free consultation for students and researchers. You're happy to contact me. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nazia. I'm sure it is helpful, and we all struggle with analysis in this research. We do write up, but when it comes to these fancy tools, I admit I am a little lost at all this. And it was really, and he's really presented really well, so it made it easier to understand what SPSS is. Sounds good. All right, so we will take another 5 minutes. Anybody wants to ask Dr. Nazia any questions, please go ahead and do so before we finish our webinar for today. So somebody's requesting your email, I think, or your number so they can communicate
it's
with
already
you.
on the it's on the first slide, and then Maria, you're going to send them the slides. You can
Though
always
we don't
contact
share
me
the
on.
slides, we will share the recording, in fact.
Okay,
Yes,
I
yeah,
can write it here.
please,
Yeah,
thank you.
you can always contact me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I've got the same scarf and the same picture, so it would be easy for you to recognize me. So
Yes.
this is my official address. So, and you can also send me an email here. And someone was asking about booking a session. So on my website, there is a little form. You can book 30 minutes free consultation for your research. I work with people who are doing PhD, and that's free of cost because I know how torturous is it to do a PhD. So I would love to help you in terms of that. Okay.
Thank you
Maybe
so
Dr.
much.
Nazia, before you go, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
The first one is, first of all, is to appreciate the fact that your presentation is amazing, suburb, it's excellent, it's splendid. Now, may I know if using the same data analysis, one can be able to conduct or to do a mixed study type of research at any level? Is it possible? If yes, how can I be helped? I'm in need of your help on how to do about it. Yeah, because I'm also a student doing PhD in linguistics of African languages. Yes.
Okay, so if you're talking about quantitative, yes, you can do it. But for qualitative research, probably not the best tool. You need to look at some other qualitative research tools. But if you have gathered any data that has got some numbers in it, as long as, or you can convert that data into zeros, ones, and twos, you can always use it, because SPSS and any analytics, they work with zeros and ones, the binary code. So you need to understand and represent that data in terms of quantitatives. When you talk about mixed method, I'll give you my example. So I did a survey, an experiment, and an interview during my PhD. So for all these three, I actually used different tools to do the data analytics or to write my chapter. So with survey and experiment, I used SPSS. For interview, I used NVivo, which was discussed earlier in the meeting today. So I think if you're doing mixed method, depending upon your question, as long as you have some numbers, you use SPSS. If you don't have numbers, then you need to find a qualitative data analytics tool. And if you can book an appointment with me, maybe I can share you with some ideas as to how which tool can help you, save some time quickly. And also something depends on your research question. So I think that will be helpful. Yes, another question. You are right. SPSS data analytical software, obviously it's not free, but I told you during the meeting, there are some initiatives that the government does, and they have this relationship with universities. And I have looked at, in Saudi Arabia especially, they're doing some investment in terms of helping students to learn data analytics. So some of the courses are free there. So if you go to that IBM.SA, like what IBM is in Saudi Arabia, if you go to that website, you will see that there is a place where you can create a student or an educator or a researcher free domain. And when you enter there, you will see that many courses are free, right? But this software is not free. You can download it for 30 days, or like you can and you can also get a subsidized rate, someone told me, when I was working in Al-Yamama University. So there was like some contract between IBM and the university in which researchers can get a subsidized rate. But this is not it's expensive. But if you're doing PhD, it's your university's responsibility to give you SPSS. Remember that. Now, if you're not aware of that, you need to go and check your library. Your library and the Higher Degree Research Center, they must have access to SPSS. You go and ask them, tell them to give you SPSS because you need it for your PhD. You're doing PhD for that university in the end, right? So you are working really hard. They need to give you that software. Now, you don't know how to learn it, which I just told you today. Go to Lead Statistics and use that step-by-step instructions, and I hope it is helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Nazia. We have kept you awake quite long now. It's very late in Australia where you are, but we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. If there are not any more questions, you can open up your cameras now, and we can see you all and say a goodbye together before we end the session. If you all want to open up your cameras. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. Great. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much, Dr.
I hope you all enjoyed it and learned. And
we do enjoy the session.
Great.
We do enjoy the session.
Everybody. It's nice to see you. We've been all hiding behind the videos. So let's say hi before we end up our session.
I can't wait to learn from Dr. Nazia and everyone else when doing my PhD.
Great. All the best for your future endeavors, all of you, whoever is pursuing the studies or whoever thinking to pursue it. And it's a pleasure to have you all. We hope to see you all in our future events. One is next month. So keep on following us on LinkedIn and Instagram, and we keep on posting and emailing. If anybody is struggling to receive our emails, you can look in your junk box. Somebody lines up in the spam box. So just move it to inbox and you will be updated. Great. All right. So don't forget to fill in the feedback form before you leave, and you will receive your certificates into 7 to 8 days. All right.
Thank you so much, Mari.
Thank you. Bye. Bye for now.
Thank you,
Ms. Manal, for moderating the session today.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.